Well, let's have a chat now with Phillip Ingram. He's a former senior military intelligence officer and joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look, we've been speaking to you, lots of our guests today. We've seen people who've been, talking to us throughout the invasion of Ukraine. What happens next in Ukraine? Things have widened now. There's been a lot of conversation even before Saturday's attempted mutiny by the Wagner Group forces of what the impact of the failures of the Ukraine war would be for Vladimir Putin and his regime in the Kremlin. What is your reaction to what's happened?
Well, I'll echo what everyone else is saying in that it's weakened Putin's position. It's actually highlighted how out of control he is because, if we look at what has happened on the ground with Prigozhin and the Wagner Group, it wasn't just the Wagner Group. It wasn't just Prigozhin. He didn't wake up a couple of days ago and suddenly go, that's it, I've had enough, I'm marching to Moscow. It takes a long time to plan that. And you look at the meeting that he had in the Southern Group of headquarters with the Deputy Defence Minister and the Deputy of the GRU, the first directorate, the Russian military intelligence organization, and they were having a robust business meeting. It wasn't a captor and his captives, Prigozhin having taken over Rostov-on-Don. So there are other elements that we are not aware of at the moment that were supporting what Prigozhin was doing.
Yes.
He was the front man, and I think it got slightly out of control because, if we look at what happened inside Ukraine, it took the Wagner Group 18 months to advance 7 kilometers. It took them less than 24 hours to advance 800 kilometers inside Russia. So a lot of people have been caught by surprise. There's been a lot of immediate reaction to try and stop something spiraling out of complete control. And I think Prigozhin himself was probably slightly concerned that it was going to spiral out of control. But there's a lot more information to come out because he's not going to go quietly to Belarus and sit there.
Well, that's the thing. When he's slinking off, we know that Vladimir Putin has the ego the size of Jupiter, but we know so does Yevgeny Prigozhin, don't we? And he's been let's say, sassing and disrespecting Vladimir Putin in a way that we know that the Russian leader never accepts. I mean, actually, let's listen to an interesting clip from retired American General David Petraeus. He has a warning for Prigozhin. Here's what he had to say yesterday.
Prigozhin kept his life but lost his Wagner Group, and he should be very careful around open windows in his new surroundings in Belarus where he's going.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously reference to the huge number of people who even say a word out of turn to Vladimir Putin, let alone try and mount a military coup, who end up mysteriously falling from windows.
Well, yes, or they get the choice to have a heart attack in 3 weeks' time. It's not uncommon. It is nice to have the choice, but we have to also recognise that underpinning a lot of this is the wider criminal network that's going on. Wagner are not just Ukraine focused. Wagner have got an awful lot more in Africa. They're in Syria, Libya, Central African Republic, Mali and Mozambique. Now, in a lot of those areas, they're controlling the diamond mines, the gold mines, corrupt regimes that are keeping in power, and they're siphoning off a lot of money.
Yeah.
That is keeping Putin and his inner circle oligarchs with the financial wherewithal to be able to move around and do what they need to do at a time whenever a lot of their other assets in international banks are frozen.
Yeah.
So Wagner, you can't just take the head of Wagner and go in and close his offices and all the rest of it, and then all of that's going to sort itself out.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot more going on under the surface, and corruption is at every level, and criminality is at every level, from Putin down.
Yeah, and that's the thing, as previous guests have pointed out, and we've discussed many times, we are talking about a mafia, corrupt, criminal state, and that's part of the reason why we think, that the Russian war effort has been so unsuccessful. 3 weeks to take Kyiv, or 3 days even. We're a year and a half in, and not looking very likely at all that Russia will win this war, and that's because the level of corruption and incompetence that operates when you have a dictator and surrounded by yes men, and everything is based on the number of rubles you can pay. There's a lot of talk that Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner Group, sort of turned tail, either because the highest bidder won, and Putin said via his chum Alexander Gzinko in Belarus said basically, I'll pay you more to stop than whoever's paying you to come to Moscow. Or, as many intelligence reports are suggesting, there were threats to his family and the families of other war leaders. At the end of the day, You know, everyone can be a big, strong man until, as we were saying earlier, someone has kidnapped your daughter and is threatening to do their worst. I mean, there's no doubt Prigozhin is quite happy to have every Ukrainian woman raped, every child abducted or killed, and every man tortured to death. We know this is the most brutal man, a brutal personal history, and his group, the most brutal fighters in Ukraine. But when it comes to your own family, you feel rather differently.
Oh, very much so. And that any of that could be true. All of that could be true. And we don't know what the levers were that were used to push it. I've heard reports that Xi Jinping from China was involved because he was concerned about the potential for nuclear escalation if Prigozhin had got his hands on nuclear weapons. He is horrible. And this is day 488 of Vladimir Putin's 10-day special military operation. Putin has not got a plan for how this is going to go, and he is losing on the ground. The Ukrainians have the initiative. They're progressing slowly, but then it is not an operation that is going to go fast. No. Too many commentators are criticizing them, saying that they are losing because they haven't kicked the Russians out quickly. No, this is a very long, slow, deliberate operation, and it will be costly.
One of the big hopes over the weekend was, people wanting Putin out, but also the opportunity for chaos in the Russian military ranks, an opportunity for the Ukrainian forces to seize more territory back. They did make some advances. They have been making some advances with this, as you say, slow counter-offensive. There's some talk that if British and American intelligence were aware that something was brewing with the Wagner group, whether or not they were holding off. But are they going to be able to capitalise on chaos in the ranks? Or is there the fear that Putin at this point, to shore up his strongman image, he doubles down and actually we're going to see even more brutal offensive by the Russians?
Well, I think Putin will double down. I think if Putin goes, whoever comes in, the danger is that they're going to be more hardline than Putin, and they'll double down even harder. What's gone on over the last few days won't affect the tactical situation on the ground because the Russian troops are still in the trenches. They're still protected by their minefields, their anti-tank traps, and they've still got their artillery, and they're focused on survival. First and foremost, the Ukrainians still have to punch through them. There's still that fight going on, and it's been going on over the last couple of days. We just haven't been reporting it. Where it gives the Ukrainians an advantage is the Russians have got a very top-down command and control system. So this has confused the higher levels of command and control. If Ukrainians can then attack some of those intermediate headquarters that are based inside Ukraine's borders in Russia's area, attack Russia's command and control, and attack their logistic bases and some of the lines of communication, the bridges and other bits and pieces from Crimea, they can increase that confusion. And that will mean that it's going to be more difficult for artillery supplies, tank supplies and all the rest of it to get to the forward troops. They're going to start to run out of ammunition. That's when the Russian forward troops are going to suddenly go, to save my life, it's not fight the attackers, it's run away quickly. Yeah, and that's when the tactical advantage comes.
Yeah, and we've already seen that, haven't we? Can I just ask you just finally about, the two men at the centre of this, Vladimir Putin and, of course, Yevgeny Prigozhin. They're both sort of the man, the myth sort of characters, aren't they? And there's a lot of, illusion built up around them. There's a lot of, of talk about how powerful and ruthless and brutal these men are. Have they both this weekend been exposed as being sort of mere mortals, or do we have more to fear from them?
I think we've got an awful lot more to fear from them. Yes, they have been exposed with weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Prigozhin, I think, his weakness here was he didn't think through the wider implications because he didn't believe that he was going to advance as quickly as he did. Things got away from him. Putin, it's actually really exposed just how vulnerable he is, how he hasn't got the ability to react, how his security forces that are around him haven't got the ability to see these things before they happen. His intelligence services failed, and then his security, his number two is Patrushev, the Secretary of the Security Council, former head of the FSB. He should have seen this. He was responsible for internal security inside Russia and has failed. We've heard nothing from him.
No, indeed. I wonder if he jumped on his private jet or if he's already fallen out of that window. We'll find out in due course, no doubt. Phillip Ingram.